Freezing. That's all right. It's all right. No, it's all right.
I turned that on high because it's warm. So it's not freezing. Hey guys, Alex and Dan from 7th Hour Films back again with Doctor Who Classic. Last time on Doctor Who Classic, we started off The Ice Warriors, which I will once again show off the DVD that we have of this one. What happened on that one?
We actually thought it was like two separate stories. I mean, and the Ice Warriors were only like kind of a random part of it at the beginning.
Yeah.
Now, they're back on Earth.
Yes.
And some kind of creeping glacieritis.
I don't know, it's some new ice age, basically. New ice age,
yeah. And they're trying to find ways of keeping the ice at bay. And while they're out there, an archaeological crew discovers something in the ice, and unfortunately they melt it out, and it comes back to life and goes back and lets out several others. And supposedly there's a ship buried somewhere under the ice.
Yeah.
And Jamie supposedly got killed, but then he wasn't. And it was just a kind of a jumble there. But I think that our major take on it was a really good story to which the Ice Warriors up to this point seem incidental.
Yeah, honestly, they're kind of in the background and they're still deciding whether or not they should actually try to conquer Earth. They're thinking oh well, we could, but we might not be ready. Maybe we should head back to Mars. But yeah, the main thing has been, I guess this whatever station that's been. I don't remember if they were monitoring the glaciers or if they were doing something about it. I guess they had the ionizer.
Yeah.
So, but that's the thing. They did say it was basically global freezing.
Yeah.
Because they had synthesized food and everything. They didn't need plants.
That's
so
right.
There was no carbon dioxide. It's the opposite of what's actually going on now. So yeah. But the Ice Warriors are really they're just kind of there.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, is still interesting. I kind of like it, but it's just kind of odd.
I'm assuming that the Ice Warriors will take a much bigger part in these last 3 episodes.
Yeah, I assume that too. So, but yeah, overall, still really interesting. Now, we don't know where we are on Earth or when, for that matter.
I think we made the assumption that they're somewhere in Europe.
Yeah.
Because they didn't make any mention of North America or the Americans or the Canadians or anything.
Yeah.
So they may actually be in Great Britain somewhere, but again, I don't think that was actually specifically mentioned.
Yeah, and who knows? Maybe if there are so many glaciers, maybe sort of the borders start getting a little fuzzy at some point.
Yeah.
That nice little channel between England and France, not exactly a channel anymore. It could be that.
Well, strangely enough, if there is in fact that much ice. The English Channel is very shallow, as is the Bering Strait, and we know in the last real ice age that the British Isles were connected to the continent by dry land, and Siberia and Alaska were connected, as Australia probably was to Southeast Asia as well. So,
I remember, that just kind of reminds me, I saw a video where someone made a simulation of Earth, how it's going to be for 300 million years, and how the continents are going to shift around. And the funniest thing was, as everything was sort of reforming together into a new Pangea and everything, the British Isles were still there. 300 million years later, they were still just sort of off, they were on another side of the Earth, but they were still pretty intact. And all the comments on it were wow, they really meant it when they said Brexit. So, so yeah, maybe it could be like that. Who knows? But yeah, so we don't know when we are, though. We don't really have a year on that. But honestly, I mean, it's not a detriment to the story that we don't have that. So it's just kind of interesting that they haven't said anything. We also had the whole thing of kind of science versus politics, because we had Clint, who was oh, well, I don't need those experts. They have too many crazy ideas and stuff. Which drove away the one expert that he had. So,
yeah, we were about the timeline. We were wondering, this is perhaps roughly the same time as the moon base, because they were talking about controlling the weather.
Yeah.
But is it before or after the Dalek invasion of Earth? Because we've got 2 or 3 different stories all set within about 200 years of 1967, 68, 69, whatever it is there. So.
See, I feel the biggest problem, though, is that, like the Daleks invasion of Earth is like 2164 or something like that, and then we have the moon base, which is like 2070, I think they said, and stuff. And it's like, I think since the regeneration, they've tried to keep some continuity, at least with like the Cybermen. It's like, oh, that's why you went to the moon base after we destroyed Mondas and all that. Like, so they try to keep that consistent. But I don't think they're really thinking that far back. Thinking back, 4 seasons ago when we had the Dalek invasion of Earth. So I don't know. But that just makes it all the more fun for whoever writes the Doctor Who wiki to try to keep track of everything. That has to be such a pain. Especially once you include all the audios and comics and everything. You put all that together into one kind of continuity. So, anywho, we should go ahead and move on into the last 3 episodes of The Ice Warriors. Here we go.
I don't know if I mentioned this before, but the pictures they show in the background here with the opening, that's not really glacier. I mean, in the far background, that's glacier, but all this, hanging icicles and stuff like that, that's not exactly what you would see at a glacier.
Yeah. I understand you gotta make, like, alien hands and stuff, but they gotta, like, make them look functional.
Have you seen the propulsion unit of the spacecraft, girl?
Propulsion unit?
The engines!
Oh, yes. They're busy repairing them now.
I was gonna say, does Victoria really know what an engine is?
I've no idea.
She'd know what a steam engine is.
Reactor turbine?
Interested in our engines. Why are they afraid?
You guys are really struggling to make that mouth move.
Well, you choose the category of the article that you want by indicating it on one of these little chaps here. Jolly good. And now you dial the precise chemical formula that you want there.
May I? There's something I need.
That was the most British sentence I've ever heard. These little chaps here. Jolly good.
It's the old rotary dial.
Meh.
Water.
But you must be in a position to defend yourself. They're trying to kill you out of hand.
Oh, I don't think so. This is my defense.
But how can you rely on that? They've already proved themselves to be utterly ruthless.
I think they'll listen to me.
You mean you're going to let them take you prisoner?
That is exactly what I'm going to do.
Really having to figure out his logic there. I was hoping that was part of her plan and that would cause an avalanche. See, if only she had a gun, she'd be lighting up fools left and right.
Well, their weapons must have affected your central nervous system.
You mean I'm paralyzed?
I don't know that he would know what a central nervous system is.
Yeah, that's a good point.
That's stuff that we didn't really learn till the late 1800s.
And I doubt the Highlanders would have known about that.
Succeed in melting the ice. There will be floods. No hope for our engines then. Or for us. The gun is our only chance.
What if they're literally just trying to get back to Mars?
It might be, yeah.
Very interesting sets.
Yeah.
Now, I understand the somewhat lizard-like appearance, but the incredibly wide hips seem very strange.
Yeah. I mean, it could be armor, but it's kind of weird armor, I guess.
Yeah. It strikes me that that's just part of their bodies.
Yeah.
And again, if they are, I realize they're from Mars, which has a cold atmosphere, but the lizard-like appearance would seem to suggest that they're from a warmer climate.
Yeah.
Useless and unnecessary.
want to help you.
Well, they may be in Scotland then, if he's a local.
No.
We actually remember we're on a glacier up there in Alaska.
Oi. Yeah, I remember that. Was that where you got the rental car stuck?
Yeah. Tried to turn around, backed it into a small ditch, and got it stuck in the snow.
Oh, it was so cold.
But if you do that, my body will explode.
Alrighty. That is part 4.
Well, again, the story is, again, very well written.
Yeah.
Did we ever figure out who this Brian Hales was and what else he wrote?
No, I didn't.
I should have looked that up.
Yeah. Oh well.
Anyway, but yeah, I mean, it holds together. There's especially the sets are really good. The idea of the falling ice several times.
Yeah.
So yeah, no complaints about it. I can understand why this is one that people say we should have seen the first time around.
Yeah. And it's also just interesting that it's like, okay, there is conflict between the humans and the ice warriors, but it's really not like this typical, like, yeah, we're going to conquer and all that stuff. It's really just like, okay, we don't really know you guys. We don't know what your ionizer is. We're trying to get back, but we're keeping an eye on you. Yeah. But that's why they want to know about the ionizer. Yeah. And they want to know if the humans are going to be a threat. So it's all very tricky. And then with the, I guess the second in command there, is probably thinking now, well, maybe we should increase the ionizer and just take the risk if on the off chance we don't hear from the doctor. So, yeah. I feel a little bad for Storr. He's just kind of dead, so I mean,
turned him to mush.
Yeah, it was one of those things like, oh man, he doesn't like the scientists, so he'll go to the ice war. He's like, oh well, they might accept him, and then it's like, well, no, they wouldn't accept him. He has no knowledge or anything for them to use.
And what you're saying, basically, we're saying about it's really kind of layered. The ice warriors are not exactly villains.
Yeah,
and inside the humans, you've got Storr, who is a local who doesn't believe in any of the scientific stuff that's going on. And then you have Penley, the scientist who left because he thought, what was his name?
Clint.
Leader Clint is just a bean counter.
Yeah.
And then you got the bean counters who are saying, no, this is our job, it's our mission, we must do this at all costs, no matter the human cost or anything else like that. And then you got the Doctor and Jamie and Victoria who are trying to kind of tie all this stuff together.
Yeah.
So it's a multi-layered script, which, again, some of the ones we've seen previously, the stories, you look at them and go, yeah, these secondary stories weren't necessary. They're obviously padding.
Yeah. Well, it's also interesting, too, like, okay, so why do the Ice Warriors have Victoria? In case they need to use her, basically. Like they said, it's like, well, we need her to draw out the really smart one at the base, which ends up being the Doctor. Of course, the Doctor kind of came of his own volition, but still. So I like that everything they do, it's not, you're right, it's not necessarily evil. They're just trying to, get through whatever's going on with whatever they can. And so when, Victoria comes back and they realize, oh, one of our men is dead, it's like, well, now we have to, actually throw you in the brig, because we can't really be nice anymore. You got one of our guys killed by running away. Yeah. So, you know what else is nice? When we get a 6-parter and then we realize, oh yeah, this needed to be 6 parts. This works as 6 parts. That's always so nice.
Yeah. Now, that actually looks like it's outdoors.
Yeah.
And if not, it's a very good set.
Storr was a huntsman, an expert with a bow and arrow.
That's no good wishing. Well, I'd better carry on. Lead on, Macduff.
I don't know there's bears in Scotland. That looks like a very small bear, too.
Yeah. Well, when the oceans froze over, they just sort of walked until they made it to Scotland.
I understand the costuming, black and white stripes and everything, because it's a good visual,
Marker 4.
but it doesn't make any logical sense. You know, it's not like when we saw that one where the aliens all looked alike, but they had like one stripe or two stripe or three stripes for their rank. This doesn't really give us that indication.
Well,
Finley, are you all right? I'll get out from under this brute. I will be. You sure you're all right? Well, he's told me that. No, we better get away quick. He won't be any friendlier when he wakes up.
you gotta sick the bear on the Martians. That's what they did in Santa Claus Conquers the Martians.
All right, Victoria. Don't cry. No. That's better. That's better.
To try and escape with this.
What is it?
Ammonium sulfide.
Ammonium sulfide. It's a new stink bomb.
Have the benefits of a classical nucleus. It is indeed a hot stink bomb.
Okay, that's part 5.
Well, again, for once, this is one that needs all 6 parts.
Yeah. So, it is interesting that, we've kept saying, the conflict is really just the fact that they don't really trust the humans, which is true. It is interesting they are still a little stubborn, though, that they just won't accept any help from anyone. So, it's not just that they don't trust them, but they are still kind of like, just no. So, that is pretty interesting. And apparently they need fuel from the base. I guess that could help them get out, which is interesting.
And we're assuming that is nuclear fuel, some kind of plutonium or
something like
uranium
that.
or something like that.
Yeah. I do like that, again, showing a bit of a funnier side to Doctor Who. Just that whole crying sequence was very clever to get a way to talk between them. So, yeah.
It's interesting that Victoria got the stink bomb open because the Doctor couldn't do it.
Yeah.
I thought maybe they were going to let him take it, and then, of course, his hand would crush it.
Yeah, so... Well, I mean, it's got to be hard to, hold things. You have to hold it just like that and then kind of crush it, so...
But that's like when the Daleks have to operate machinery, They don't have any specific kind of digital manipulation that they can use.
Yeah.
We must escape.
It's not just a question of escape, Victoria. We've got to take some action. It's this gun that's given Varga control of the base. Without it, he'd be helpless.
What can we do?
Unplug it.
Bang your head on the door there, did you, boys? 2 of them did.
Yeah. It's like a stormtrooper.
It can melt rock. What a weapon!
It's not a weapon. It's a scientific instrument.
I see it differently.
It's still a highly dangerous machine.
Then run it
Military
carefully
versus
down
scientific
the
use.
Safety
No.
level.
So basically, it's military versus politics versus science.
Yes.
Nothing. You have less value to me than your colleague who has certain skills.
But you don't know everything.
They don't really need the guy that gives orders.
There is something wrong.
Whoa. Oof.
Wait, how did the Ice Warriors recover and the people didn't?
Yeah. I thought they were supposed to be a lot worse off.
Well, that means we dare not use the ionizer at full force. That's our last chance gone. Why?
For heaven's sake.
Because of the risk, man. You know what would happen?
Of course there's a risk, but it's a risk we must take. It's the only way.
Exactly. The computer says now. Is our supreme.
This is a decision for a man to take, not a machine. The computer isn't designed to take risks. But that is the essence of man's progress. We must decide.
If you do that, you'll still ruin the world.
All progress depends on the unreasonable man.
The cameraman's having fun.
So they melted them.
Yeah. And luckily did not explode in the process.
You are the most insufferably irritating and infuriating person I've ever been privileged to work with.
Thank you.
I've always written my own speeches and my own reports.
Now are you going to include... Well, where's the doctor?
He loves to bail out. When did it get upright? Righty then. That is the Ice Warriors.
Well, again, a lot of really good storylines.
Yeah.
And I think we mentioned this last time, very similar to that, 1986 film War Games, where you cannot trust the computer to take the risk that a human would be able to make that, It's also Michael Crichton Andromeda Strain, where, you have all these computers trying to decide whether or not to allow a virus to continue mutating, and then they call it the odd man theory, the unmarried man who has to make the decision: do I try to save the scientific knowledge or do I try to save the world? So,
yeah. Oh, okay. Well, there's a part of me that only slightly feels bad for the Ice Warriors, because it's like, well, at the beginning they were just trying to get home and stuff, but they did start getting a bit more hostile as the episode progressed. Yeah. So, yeah. A good first outing for them, definitely.
Yeah.
So, I mean, considering, of the, I guess, the more iconic classic Doctor Who villains, I think the Ice Warriors are like maybe sort of mid-tier sort of classic villains. Like, they're not quite, Dalek Cybermen, but they're not, like super low or anything like that. But pretty solid considering we had the original Dalek serial, which was good, all things considered, but, kind of dragged a bit. And then the first Cybermen serial, which was good and had, like, the Cybermen themselves were really good, but it had some other faults and stuff. Overall, this one was pretty solid from episode 1 to 6. Yeah. So
it makes me wonder if it might have been better to let them escape, to let them go with the knowledge that they would have a hard time defeating the humans.
Yeah, it could have been that, because I mean, it would make sense why they wouldn't be able to come back immediately. Like, okay, their ship is pretty damaged. Like, even if they can sort of limp along back to Mars, like, it would take a while to get back to Earth if they were trying to conquer it. Yeah. And even then, they would be like, well, it's very difficult because those ionizers, like, yeah, they said they don't use them as weapons, but if they wanted to use those as weapons, those are going to be pretty dangerous. Yeah. So, yeah, it would have been interesting if they had just escaped instead of died there.
But still, overall, again, enjoyed all 6 episodes.
Yeah.
Again, even the small plots, like the plot with Storr, they all seem to ultimately fit back into the whole storyline, getting to the point, like you said, where the Ice Warriors do ultimately turn into somewhat villains there at the end. And again, that then forces Clint to say, no, I'm going to follow what the computer does, and Penley says, okay, then we're all going to die. So,
yeah. I mean, it's an interesting thing that throughout all 6 episodes, it's basically a progression of the Ice Warriors actually becoming villains. Yeah. Like, they really didn't start out that way. They were just sort of, lost and trying to, get back home. And yeah, they had some, they did some things strategically, which sort of went against the humans and the Doctor and everyone. But then throughout it, they get a bit more aggressive when things are getting a bit more, tense between them and the base. Yeah. So,
and again, not to take away, not to detract from the entire serial, But it makes you wonder if we missed, or if the writers missed, how the actions of Clint and the humans somehow prodded the Ice Warriors into doing what they did. I think they were trying to suggest that the Ice Warriors thought that the ionizer could be used against them.
Yeah.
And that wasn't really brought up until very late in the serial.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, if that had been introduced very early on, then that would have been a reason for them to get more aggressive towards the humans.
Yeah. I don't remember, how long the Ice Warriors knew about the ionizer, but, I mean, it definitely shows, because this whole thing we've been talking about, the difference between Clint and Penley is the difference between a more sort of politics-oriented mind, and Penley is more scientific, and you see those butt heads. But then it's only later that you realize that the Ice Warriors are now the military mind that are going against those two, basically.
Yeah.
So, they see the ionizer like, okay, the ionizer, well, if they have that, it's, potentially a weapon. It could be used against us or just against someone. And it's like they said, it's like when they explained it all, the first instinct was, oh, what an incredible weapon you guys have. That's very powerful. We didn't think you had something like that. And it's like, well, no, we use it as a scientific instrument. It's just to, melt the ice. And yeah, every base has one, but we're kind of stuck using it because the glacier is right on top of us, and we also have your ship to deal with.
So are you ready for a World War II parallel?
Go ahead.
Okay, well, I mean, seriously, the original idea behind the splitting of the atom was to provide a source of power. And it was only then that, I mean, very rapidly somebody said, well, wait a minute, if you can have a source of power, that power could be used for destruction. So both the Nazis and the Americans began their heavy water projects trying to figure out, we have to harness this energy before the other guy does. Whether or not we want to use it for a weapon, we're going to have to if the other guy gets it first.
Yeah. If anything, it's just, a card to keep up your sleeve.
Yeah.
Whether or not you actually use your pocket ace is debatable, but at least you have it there if you need it. So,
sorry.
I mean,
I should put up like a warning sign or something, a World War II reference coming.
But see, they would much rather you talk about World War II than us bring up the power of the Daleks again. So, and I know, I waited this long to mention that. We actually did, there was one of the comments, I think it might have been on one of the Abominable Snowmen episodes, that was like, if you could please stop bashing the power of the Daleks, that would be really great. And I just find that funny, because I swear now half of the time we do it, it's just because it's funny now. So anytime we just sort of get to poke the fan base with that one, it's just sort of fun. So
he does it, not me.
That's true. I bring it up way more than you do. And again, most of that is just because I know it bugs people, so it's funny. So let's see here. Well, I wrote down "Don't fight." Now, why did I write that?
Don't fight.
Don't fight. It was obvious. It was in episode 4, but I don't remember. I mean, that's the first thing I wrote down, but why did I...
Was that about Victoria escaping into the ice and thinking that it was going to collapse if she could continue to scream and fight? And I don't know.
I mean, it would have been around that time, but I don't think it was about Victoria.
Oh.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I wrote down a note and I don't remember what it was, so... Oh, well. Probably once I go back and edit, I'll be like, oh, that was the reason. So, oh well. But let's see. But the next one would be about Store, which again was interesting, because you would almost, sort of step back and think like, okay, well, why did we have this character? For the most part, I was like, okay, he just like his main purpose was to basically just die, but he does set a good. I mean, he basically is there to establish Penley's character, because it's not just like, oh well, Penley's out there and he's away from everything, but you have to then create this other character who's even more different from Penley. Like, yeah, he's out, he's away from all the scientists and stuff, but that's just because he doesn't like the scientists and stuff. Whereas Penley had to disagree with Clint and the computer and stuff.
That adds a fourth dimension if you want to talk about, you got the scientists and you got the military. What did we say the other one was?
Politics.
Well, this guy literally represents the Luddites. All right, this is a guy who says you're all worthless. We should, go back to nature. We should, forget about, taking pills. We should get back to growing plants and, replenish the carbon dioxide on the earth and that sort of thing. So, again, they didn't really develop him, but he did add a necessary, like you said, a necessary element there, because otherwise, then you could end up thinking that Penley was just the mad anthropologist, mad scientist sort of thing. But he has to find somebody to survive, and being a scientist, he might not know that on himself. So Storr kind of helps establish the reason he's been able to live all this time is because he's basically gone native.
Yeah, and it also, like you said, it does make sense that he would need to find someone, but it also then establishes that they're not really friends. Like they're really just sort of there because they do sort of benefit each other. Obviously, Storr is there to like hunt and set up survival stuff for Penley. Penley, obviously, even though Storr is sort of against science and stuff like that, he does have medicine, and he does he knows how to figure out like, okay, we live in a plant museum. Okay, I can make this sort of work. Like, I can at least, contribute to this, to our survival.
Yeah. I'm very surprised that Jamie never said anything about his accent, about Storr's accent. Because they did interact a couple of times, and just to say, oh, you're a Scotsman, just where are we sort of thing, if nothing else.
Yeah. So. Which, and they did say later that, like, oh, if their ship explodes, it might destroy the whole island. So presumably then, this would be, like you said, I guess Scotland, technically.
And they did say Britannicus base.
Yes, they did. But then Storr died, which, again, it was one of those things where like, oh, okay, so he's going to go join the Ice Warriors. Like, oh, well, that does make sense. If he's against the scientists, he might try to help them. But obviously the Ice Warriors don't need him because he doesn't have any information.
Yeah.
So, like, they would rather have the scientists because they can at least tell them stuff.
Yeah.
So, that did make sense. And then again, I wrote down the conflict. It's just interesting that, obviously the conflict and the tension escalates until eventually, yes, the Ice Warriors do have these sort of malicious intent and we need to stop them. But for a while, it really just is sort of a... well, I guess honestly, you could say, because I made the mention of pocket aces earlier, it's like it is sort of a poker game. Like, we're just sort of watching each other, trying to figure out everyone's tell and everything. And it's like, okay, so they're scientists. They have some sort of thing that could be bad for us. Okay, we need to think about this. Like, but they could help us, but they could not help us. They could be a danger, which that's more of what they're thinking because, they're more of that military mindset. So it's interesting how for a while it's not even really like, oh, here are these aliens and they're here to conquer and we have to stop them. Like, no, they're really trying to get home, but does that put them into conflict with everyone else?
Yeah.
And that's obviously, the tensions are raised even more when, it's like, okay, we need to use the ionizer to get rid of the glacier, but that could destroy, the Ice Warrior ship. So do we destroy that? That could also destroy us. Do we take that risk? And so it's like this big stalemate for a while as tensions just keep increasing.
Yeah.
So,
and again, that whole thing about the computer can't take the risk. Penley there at the end basically said, if we don't do this, then it's certain death.
Yeah.
So we have to take the chance on the 1 in a million shot that we will survive. Whereas the computer cannot make that decision because the computer, cannot allow itself to be destroyed. It can't commit suicide.
Right. Well, I wrote down Jamie and a bear. That didn't really do anything. I don't know if that was outside or not, that shot, but it did look like it, definitely. It was obviously different, and they says like, oh, well, we're on the edge of the forest. After this, it's just sort of a beeline to the base, and it's like, forest. We haven't seen the forest yet. Like, what we've basically seen, is the base and then, obviously the plant museum and the ship. Those are our interiors, but for exteriors, we don't see a ton of them except for these, 1 or 2 shots in the sort of ice corridors that obviously they work, and then that's how you get all the ice falling and stuff, and those shots are all great. But then suddenly, for one shot and only one shot, we're out here in some sort of forest that has always been here, I guess.
Yeah.
And then that's where we have our bear. So,
but I like the way that the shots of the actual bear were obviously from outside, from what it was his natural, or seemed like his natural habitat.
Yeah.
And the way that they were able to recreate, if it was a set, the sled scene, so that when the bear lumbered towards them, the two scenes seemed to mesh pretty much seamlessly.
Yeah, because I mean, obviously they never showed Jamie and Penley and the bear in the same shot. You know, when it's like, oh, the bear's coming for us, and obviously it's just the camera moving towards them, and then they shoot at the camera, which is good. So I guess just a POV shot of the bear. So, but yeah, it did look like really good. You know, even though it's obviously like, okay, either they recreated it on the set, or if they did go and film on location, then obviously they just did it when the bears weren't around. So
well, it could have been a nature park or something there in London, or I think they said they shot some of the exterior scenes for the Himalayas up either in Wales or in Scotland. Can't remember which, but some of the commenters said those were actually done outdoors.
Yeah. So, but it was just also interesting, and then it just sort of happens. Even like Penley's wound that he had, it's like, oh, I got clawed. Well, anyway, let's move on with the story. So, let's see. They did mention the ionizer. One potential problem was that if they could use the ionizer without destroying the Ice Warrior's ship, they did bring up it could still flood the ship and make it completely useless, which I thought was interesting. Just showing another thing, and obviously it's another thing that the Ice Warriors are thinking of, which is like, okay, you want to use the ionizer, but we're looking at all the different things that could go wrong with it, specifically to our ship, so which escalates the conflict even more there. And then I did write down that they were a bit stubborn, because they weren't, and again, you could sort of maybe tie this into the military aspect of the Ice Warriors, but they were stubborn when the doctor was like, well, why don't we just talk? Why, maybe we can help you. And it's like, no, you can't help us. We know, it's like, all right, you have an ionizer, and we know the 10 different things that could go wrong with it. And the doctor's saying like, well, let's figure out the 10 things that could go right with it. And it's like, nope, we saw the 10 bad things. That's all we need. Yeah. So it's just interesting, again, that mindset. And
I'd also like to say that as far as, bug-eyed monsters are concerned, I really felt that more menacing than their look was their voices. That very kind of sinister whisper. And if you noticed, they all had these rather interesting kind of head moves, which were not exactly reptilian, but they were, again, very, very creepy. And again, my only problem, as I said, the having the lower part of the jaw works, and the everything else. It's just that those gigantic, hip bags that if I had never seen them, I would have never known, because you would have just seen these guys from the waist up, and they would have, again, looked literally like humanoid lizards. Yeah. So, and especially the one time where they had the one Ice Warrior leaning over some kind of instrument, and he just had that incredibly enormous backside. Yeah. That was, unfortunately, somewhat hysterically funny.
Yeah. And then just, the hands just were kind of odd. It's like, okay, well, I get you want to make it alien, but there's nothing wrong with fingers, Because even like, when you start off with the Cybermen, they have those fingers. They're just in gloves. But then, they come back in the moon base and everything, and they have more like the tentacle arm sort of thing. And it's like, you could just have an arm.
And I may have mentioned this before. In 1981, when I did Beauty and the Beast, we made it so that I had gloves on where I had, I still had fingers, but there were only 3 of them. I had to work them together like that. And I think if the Ice Warriors had had that would have made more sense, because, again, you get more of that opposable thumb sort of thing. But just the 2 little pinchers like that, you're right, it was somewhat distracting.
I mean, which is why they had to hot glue their gun onto their hand. Yeah. Because otherwise they can't hold it, so...
And again, I thought about that it would have made more sense if the gun were like located on the top of their wrist, so that to activate it, all you'd have to do is that sort of thing. Yeah. Putting it there in the crook of their thumb and their fingers seemed kind of odd. But again, minor points. I truly love this episode, this whole serial.
Yeah, definitely. Let's see. We had the whole thing with the fuel. So it does make me wonder, if they had gotten the fuel from the reactor and stuff into their ship, were they planning to just bust through the ice themselves?
It certainly seemed that way because they didn't seem to be waiting for it to melt.
Yeah. So, which, I mean, I guess that would have been, they get the power, they bust through, but most of the glacier is still there, and now the ionizer doesn't have any power. So I guess that was just sort of the risk there. So yeah.
And again, mercury isotope. I thought that was kind of unusual. I don't know that mercury has any particular, radioactive properties, but again, that just may be, my lack of knowledge about what is and is not, radioactive fuel.
Yeah. And then we had the crying scene, which I thought was clever. The Doctor's finally using his companions crying to his advantage. Because I mean, that's the thing. We've had a lot of criers over the years. Over the 5 seasons, we've had a lot of criers. Even in this episode, Victoria was running around and screaming and stuff. Which again, I thought it's like, oh, she screamed right there. It's like, oh, it's going to cause an avalanche, and it's like, oh, that would be very clever, and then it didn't happen. She just screamed right there. It's like, well, you gave away your location. What are you doing? But that scene was very, very clever and very funny. So, let's see. And then we had the whole thing with the gun, reworking the gun to basically knock everyone out, and then I guess sort of bluff them like, oh, well, I'll use it again, and that will really hurt. But you're right, when it's like, okay, but the Ice Warriors recovered faster, which I thought it was like, well, the effects are going to be really bad on the Ice Warriors, but everyone else is just going to be a little dizzy. But they were knocked out, the Ice Warriors got up, and then they hightailed it out of there because they knew they couldn't take another.
And you were right about their helmet. That wasn't just their natural, cranial shape, because the doctor said it should reverberate inside their helmets to cause them pain.
Yeah, so I think it is some sort of armor that they are wearing. So, and then we also did have Penley turn up the heat at one point, which was starting to affect them. But then the doctor used the gun anyway, so I'm not quite sure what Penley was going to accomplish there.
Well, again, I think he was trying to figure out, because he's not aware of what the doctor's doing, so he's just trying something on his own. And by the way, that thing about Victoria knowing that it was a stink bomb, I'm hoping that now they will start bringing out more of that side of her, that she is the scientist's daughter.
Yeah.
Just like Polly was the, executive secretary to a scientist in the War Machines, because a normal Victorian young lady wouldn't have much of this knowledge, and as such wouldn't be a very good companion. But if she starts bringing out some of this scientific stuff that she's learned, even though it's 100 years old, I'm hoping that will take her out of that damsel in distress thing that we've seen quite a bit of lately.
Yeah, which I mean, she also had another line when the doctor was explaining something. She's like, "Oh yeah, my father told me about that once." Yeah. So yeah, so you're hoping for maybe a bit more of a scientific part to get her away from being the damsel. I just want her to get a gun and start shooting people, just like in Tomb of the Cybermen. Yeah. So hopefully, maybe we can get both. A Victorian science girl with a gun. That's what we're hoping for.
Sounds like a power ballad from some obscure rock group from the 1980s and early 90s.
Yeah. It sounds like a joke on Bill and Ted. Where,
speaking of which, we haven't seen the new Bill and Ted film yet.
No, we have not.
We ought to go watch that.
Yeah, at some point. So, let's see. And then the last thing I wrote down was Risk and the computer, which, yeah, it is interesting that they just sort of have to abandon, okay, the computer is not going to take that risk, because of course it wouldn't. We have to take the risk. It's either, if we don't do it, there is no possibility of surviving. If we do it, then I'm not saying our chances are great, but there are chances. Yeah. So,
and again, one last reference to War Games. At the end of that film, if you recall, the computer has planned out complete annihilation of the enemy in the global thermonuclear war game that it's playing. But Matthew Broderick and the scientist, I can never remember his name, they say, how do you get the computer to play itself? And he says, put in number of players 0. So the computer starts launching all of these theoretical attacks and goes through them, in a millisecond, and then comes up with the winner, and it says none. If this side launches first, everybody loses. If this side launches first, everybody loses. What about a limited attack? And it goes through like 500, 5,000, however many different scenarios, ultimately to realize that it can't win. And that's the difference here. This computer says we must protect, we must stay with the program, whatever, because it is a it doesn't learn from its past. Whereas the one in War Games, it finally comes to the conclusion, again, one of my favorite lines in all of cinema, when it finally shuts the entire war game down and it says, an interesting game, the only way to win is not to play.
Yeah. And this is slightly off topic of that, but I just remembered. There's a game, I think it's one of the Civilization games, where you create your own civilization and eventually other civilizations pop up that are based on different countries and stuff. And I think there's something like every civilization has like a meter for nuclear war, and like so everyone starts differently, except for I think India, which is led by Gandhi. They start at 0. They have no nuclear war. But the problem is if you play it right, then everyone's nuclear levels go down. But India starts at 0, so the only way they have to go is back at the top. So if they go below 0, they are immediately right at the max. And so you go over and you talk, and Gandhi, and he's like, yes, welcome to India, where our words are backed by nuclear power. So, slightly off topic of that, but I just remembered that. I thought it was funny. So,
all right, well, what's up next?
I don't know.
Oh.
So, I don't
Please don't tell me it's Daleks. No, we've already been told it's not going to be Daleks.
Yeah. I would have to go pull up the schedule. I'm not really sure. The Enemy of the World. That's specific. Which I believe complete. Yeah, 100% serial.
Wow.
Those are rare. So, which I mean, I think it's gonna be a while before. Let me look. Oh yeah. So the Web of Fear, which only one of those is missing. Fury from the Deep is animated. Okay, the Wheel in Space has like a couple that are yeah, the Wheel in Space is mostly missing, but I think other than that might be like the last. Yeah, most of them are complete or animated from here on out, and then, yeah, until eventually in season 6, the last of the missing episodes. So we're pretty good. We only have like a little bit of recon left. So, but yeah, the Enemy of the World. Don't know what that means. That could be anything. That's like a blank check, for a title. It's like, well, could be the future, could be the past, could be the present. We really just don't know.
Yeah.
And now, of course, I still have the question: how did they get the TARDIS back up in that last shot?
Yeah.
Because they didn't really like talk about it. When the Doctor said, "Oh, get back to the TARDIS and then close the door," and it's like you're gonna have to like rappel down with a rope or something. You know.
But if it landed on the slope and the ionizer was melting the ice, it might have melted the ice underneath it so that it would have tipped back upright. That's what I was thinking when I saw it at the end there.
Maybe, but it was more like, because I think the bottom was higher up than the top of it, so if anything, it should just go straight down. So, of course, presumably the TARDIS does have its own gravity, so as soon as you jump in, you jump in, and then you're immediately gravitied back onto the floor. So, presumably. Yeah. I know there's one shot in Modern Doctor Who where the Doctor like crashes the TARDIS, and so the whole thing is going haywire, and it is laid down like that, and the doors open, and you just see a grappling hook just fly out of it because he has to climb all the way back up. So yeah, that's basically that. You got anything else?
I got nothing.
All right, so that was the Ice Warriors. Of all of them to get a DVD for, this is a pretty solid one to get one. So yeah. Anyway, that is basically that. With all that being said, we're Alex and Dad from 7th Hour Films, and we will see you guys next time. Take care. Last week I did say I should have you do the outro sometime, so do you remember it?
Let's see, with all that being said, we're Alex and Dad from 7th Hour Films. We'll see you guys next time. All right, guys, if you want to watch more of Classic Who
Playlist.
you can, I don't know it.
You click on the playlist. You can subscribe if you haven't done that already, or and hit the notification bell. You can support me on Patreon.
That's where I always nod.
Yeah. Or you can follow me on social media. Links below in the description. Right. Close enough.